You're listening to the Intentional Parents Podcast, brought to you by Intentional. Intentional is all about spiritual formation in the family. We desire to bring biblical hope and practical help. Enjoy this week's conversation. So, that's the beginning of this episode is a
how to do sourdough jalapeno cheese bread.
Jalapeno cheese.
Mary, our Christmas gift to you.
Jalapeno cheese bread.
Elizabeth will make it to anybody who
No,
gives a new email address.
I think when it comes to jalapeno cheese, sourdough,
I don't have to ask.
The more jalapeno and the more cheese. What were you going to say?
I don't have to ask for it as my Christmas present anymore because you make it anyway.
Keep making it.
I've been asking for it for Christmas the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
I got home last night and forgot that she had made some for the other party that we had at Sal and Talia's house. And I was so delighted to find half a loaf of cheddar jalapeno bread. It's so different. It hits very different.
It is.
I like it.
You know what?
like
It tastes really good with homemade jam.
What?
Toasted.
I didn't even think about that.
And put homemade jam in.
Oh, she got that from her father who puts jam on his grilled
I
cheese
like that
sandwiches.
though. That's good. That's
No.
that's
So
salty and
good.
sweet.
He put my mom's
Yeah.
raspberry jam in between his grilled cheese. He'd open up his grilled cheese sandwich and put raspberry jam on.
That was
So
good.
I've
I do
been
remember
putting
that.
I have a roasted apricot jam that I make. It's made with honey, so it's just really vanilla. It's really rich.
I got to try some of this.
On the
I'll
jalapeno
take
cheese
some.
bread was amazing.
See,
She'll
this-
probably give you one. She has a bunch of them.
You have extra.
I made
wait,
a
you made 'em?
ridiculous. And actually,
You made a whole bunch of them, right?
Scarlett and I made that one.
Scarlett
so,
helped.
Yeah, she owes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm.
I'll-
You should tell Scarlett
bring
that's
it
what
by.
you want for Christmas. She can
Oh,
come
I
over
think
and get it
Scarlett.
from Diane.
Scarlett will like not stop. She's like, I'm buying you a present, Dad. I was like, sweetheart, you don't have to spend money on me. She was insistent.
Yeah.
upon
Oh,
buying
yeah.
something.
She's real excited. About
I
the
can't wait.
presents.
I'm just
Tell her if she wants to make some more money to do what she did last year. I'll pay her to come help me wrap the stockings.
Oh, she'd do it.
Okay.
Well, welcome
Diane
back to the
said,
Intentional
don't take
Parents
advantage of
Podcast.
Scarlett. She always gets asked to work. I go, I'm going to pay her. I said,
Well, you overpay.
Yes.
I'll overpay.
Hello.
You're not
Grandparents'
taking
job.
advantage of her.
Well, we're gonna keep all that in. Everybody, that's what you're capturing is what happens before we just say we're gonna start the episode.
That's what happens while Brooke tries to get us to stop talking. So
I
that
don't
we
mind it.
But there's a marital problem is that he says his jalapeno cheese bread is better than yours because he puts in more cheese and more. He actually criticized you the other night when we were at the community group.
it was
at
behind your
Salinas. He
back.
goes, I
It's
said,
also- it's also
Elizabeth
true.
made jalapeno cheese. He goes, mine's better. I put in more
really?
cheese.
I don't know if I
Look at
said
that
mine's better
really.
Well,
fully,
you
but-
just said you add more cheese and jalapeno.
it's okay. It's okay, babe. What is a lot to you is minimum to most other people, and that's been the truth of our whole marriage. She'll say like a lot of something, and like, she's always buying just enough. And you and I are the same on this, Phil.
I know.
Like,
Yes.
it's like you got to
Buy
buy a little
extra.
bit extra. Like,
No.
why are we going to run out of
You
stuff?
always want to have extra.
I know. Well, she
By
doesn't.
the way, I
really-
put in a request for him to bring me back a few of LaDonna Moser and Blaine's peanut butter ball Christmas cookies. I love those things.
Or they're dipped.
He might forget. So if you remember,
They're
Okay.
dipped in chocolate Oreos.
yeah.
I don't
So,
think she's made those.
No
for a
one
few
understands
years.
this on the podcast, but my family comes from a rich history. My dad would cook. My mom bakes. Their stuff. Yeah, I mean, the
Everything's
level. It's all
delicious.
about flavor. I mean,
Yes.
as long as you're not concerned about health
or calories,
or calories,
Exactly.
everyone
it's amazing.
wanted to be invited to your
I know.
family's Christmas
My parents
open
would do
house.
Christmas
Oh, yeah.
parties, and that was the thing. And to date, I think even now, my mom still has set up 7 Christmas trees or 8 at the home right now.
Or
By the
10.
way,
Who knows?
she's a widow and she lives by herself, and she has 7 Christmas trees
Oh
at her
my
house.
God.
It's a lot of work, is all to say. That's
Yeah.
all I'm highlighting. Is that it's so much work. But our kids, I mean, anybody that goes there, it is like you enter into a different world. So
Just remember me.
I'll remember you. I'll just say, hey, Mom, I need some extra. She won't even ask. She'll be like, she'll be thinking that I just want to take a bunch of extra home, and then I'll sneak some your way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. She could also just listen to this podcast and learn what I'm doing, but I wouldn't expect it. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. Today we're actually going to do a marriage Q&R. We wanted to respond to questions about marriage, and I think as we have some of our retreats coming in May, sad news, they all sold out. They are sold out, which I wasn't surprised with how fast everyone was grabbing tickets, but we're just honored. So can we just say thank you?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Very
Thank
Thank
you
you.
to everybody
you.
who is like coming out and spending the time, the money, the resources, Brasada, where we're going to be, is not an inexpensive place. And we wanted this to be an experience. We really wanted to get away and have it be something for each couple that is not only hopefully life-giving in a spiritual sense and in an educational sense, but also just that the spot is beautiful, that the food is wonderful.
So
that
beautiful.
Yeah, we were just there the other night. We have a friend that lives in that area, and just driving all the Christmas lights.
I wish we were having the
Incredible.
marriage retreat right now. It's just gorgeous. It's like a
Right.
scene out of
Christmas
a movie.
would
Maybe
be
that's what we need to
magical.
do is marriage
Do
retreat
one in December, early
Yeah,
December.
Maybe
Okay.
next year.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's a good idea. Yeah. So if you like that idea, please connect with us on social media, marriage retreat in December. But yeah, we just thank you for everyone that signed up for that. Also, thanks for everyone that's rated and subscribed to the podcast. If you haven't, please take a second to do that. So helpful. And remember, we're on YouTube now, so you can watch all this if you'd like. But we want to get into some of your questions. And true to form, if you follow the podcast at all, and if you're not, I'll let you know. These are questions that I've barely looked at, but questions that I definitely have not let anyone else look at.
Because you never do.
I never do. And Phil is still not bitter
I'm
about
still
that.
bitter.
But I also think I've scanned them quickly to see that I think you will all do a great job. We'll all, I think, have some things to add. So maybe we should start by also saying marriage is not easy. It's beautiful, but it's not easy. And we all know that. And so I think even as we prepare for the marriage retreats, this isn't going to be, even today as we talk about some of these questions, this isn't going to be hey, we've got this all figured out, so just do what we're doing and everything's going to be fine. That's not our experience. We don't even feel like that's a helpful way to communicate. And so we're going to share stories of our life, stories of where we've learned, I think more stories of failure than successes. But we also just want to connect with you on some of the things that you're dealing with. So with that, are you guys okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll start with one that's not directly to marriage, but is involved in every marriage. So here's the question. And it's not even a question. It just says in-law challenges and spouse roles.
In the two different things.
Really two different things, not even a question. So let's start with in-law challenges. In-law challenges. Let me be the first to take this one. I'd like to start, everyone. I've been waiting for my moment. And actually, the person who submitted this question was Brooke. No, I'm just kidding. But in-law challenges, I think that's a really interesting one. Obviously, there's not enough clarity to understand exactly what the challenges are. But any thoughts real quick on in-laws and challenges with in-laws, or just general principles or things that we've learned along the way?
I feel like it's hard to answer without any specifics around what the challenges are, because who knows if this person's saying that because the in-laws are like
Wonderful.
trying to run their life and not
Sure.
letting them leave and cleave, or they're just like they don't have a great relationship.
Well, it's obviously
It's
in-law
tough.
challenges, so there's obviously tension there.
Probably
Yeah.
some conflict.
So I feel like the only thing that comes to my mind that I can maybe say with certainty is that when there are different difficult dynamics with in-laws, it's you and your spouse that have to learn how to communicate. You're not going to change his adult parents or her adult parents. If you are like, so if it's the daughter-in-law who asked this or the son-in-law, like they're not your parents. It wasn't your family culture. It doesn't mean you can't influence it over time, but you're not going to be able to fix it directly. But I think the most important thing is that you and your spouse are able to talk about it, that you're able to, you have to remember that it's your spouse's parents. So how you talk about it matters, not just venting all of your frustrations, but being able to open the lines of communication to be able to talk with your spouse and say, hey, this is hard for me. Like this maybe feels really normal for you because you grew up in it, but this is really hard for me. And here's why. Can we talk about it? So that you guys can approach it unified versus being ununified, and the problems with the in-laws or with your parents or whatever it might be end up ripping your marriage apart.
Well,
If
I
that
was
makes
going to
sense.
maybe agree and just say one of the most common challenges is when one spouse has a really hard time with the in-laws, but maybe the spouse who is connected to those in-laws doesn't have any awareness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that creates a lot of very unhealthy
Yes,
tension.
hard.
Because essentially that one spouse kind of feels alone. And so
Yeah.
I know we've seen that a lot with just different friend dynamics, with different friend groups. And, that's a very common thing. But I'd say as much as you can do to get on the same page and like try to hear your spouse and I know it's really hard to even maybe hear that your parents who maybe you didn't see these things. I think it's hard if you don't see those things, but it's hard to hear that sometimes. So I think doing your best to listen and be open. But I agree. This is a hard one to maybe respond to. But any thoughts, Phil and Diane, really quick before we go to the next
No,
one?
I think Elizabeth said it brilliantly. I think when there's tension, the most important thing is you don't allow that to divide the two of you, because this becomes the primary relationship. Genesis 2:24, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. So this is a new family unit, and you're commanded to honor your parents, each, both husband and wife. And that's a whole nother subject for another time. But I think that the important thing is that it's a discussion. And if one of them's got a real burden, like I'm feeling really hurt by your parents, that needs to be talked about in love. And the one who has the biological tie to their parents has to be not defensive. That's my mom and dad you're talking about.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be in an argument and Satan will have won. Because now not only is there the original problem that you started talking about, it's still there. And now you've got a problem between the two of you. So I think you're totally right. I think so I would just say there's two things there. Don't let it divide the two of you. And that's where you're going to need to pray together and then listen to each other. And this is where I'm married to Diane, who listens to me really well. I don't listen to her as well as she listens to me. But I think listen to each other and what you said, Elizabeth, that's.
Yeah.
And then you may have to get some wisdom from counsel on how to handle it if it's really sticky.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about this before on our podcast, there is a time to appeal to a parent with respect and honor about a particular thing. But even that's got to be done prayerfully and carefully, because they may not be ready to receive it. It might be the right thing to do in an ideal world, but it's not the wisest thing to do in the situation. It's better to pray and wait,
Yeah.
I think we also have to remember that in relationships, there is a time to absorb the negativity or the difficulty or the jealousy or the disappointment that you have in the relationship. I constantly think of Jesus' response, 'cause it's so the opposite of my instinctive response, my flesh response. When in 1 Peter 2, it says that talking about Jesus, when reviled, which would have been, harsh, he did not revile in return.
Right.
But how? Because he entrusted himself to the Father.
That's
and so it was, I don't need necessarily the love of or the relationship with the in-laws or the respect of the in-laws that I would hope for and that would be ideal, because I can entrust myself to the love of the Father. So there is that absorbing, as we grow more mature, hopefully we're able to absorb other people's pains and idiosyncrasies more and more. But I say all that from a very safe standpoint, because I think I had kind of the ideal mother-in-law and father-in-law. Bill and Ruth Comer are now with Jesus, but they set a tone for me of relationship that I wanted to copy as closely as possible and offer that to my kids-in-law. You, Brooke, my daughters-in-law. And the tone she set was total acceptance. There was never a critical word about any of us. I don't even think she allowed it to pass into her prefrontal cortex of, oh, Diane's really blowing it in this area. She just refused. She just decided to love us. And she did a really good job with it without being, she wasn't an imposing person. She was pretty gentle. But I felt so amazingly seen and accepted by her. And so that's ideal, right?
Yeah.
That's absolutely ideal and I also think that the person asking this question is probably younger, talking about her older in-laws. You can learn from people's mistakes.
Yeah.
Say, I'm going to do this differently. And I think I'll get different results because of it. It's no guarantee. I know older friends of mine who are marvelous, wonderful people who have in-laws who, younger in-laws, spouses to their kids who reject them. So people are complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so tricky. Yeah. Just do anything, but just don't work with your in-laws. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I love you guys. Okay. Forgiving. This is a great one. Forgiving when one is overstimulated or at capacity and responds in anger to the other. So how to forgive when one or both are overstimulated at capacity and respond in anger towards the other spouse. We don't know anything
What to
about
do
that.
when one spouse responds in anger?
When one is
forgiving.
overwhelmed.
Yeah, like
So-
what do you do? Like what does that forgiving look like? I think obviously because you can have only so many words, we can add a couple of our own, ideas about that. But I could say like, well, what does it look like for us when one is overstimulated? Well, the interesting thing that's been very helpful that we don't do enough, but is when we are overstimulated or at capacity, which right now in our season of life is very,
All the time.
we laugh because if not, we cry. So, but is to say like, there's a lot of times that I'm irritated or frustrated around Elizabeth, but not at her and vice versa. And so I think that's actually been something that's been really helpful is to remind her at moments or her to me, hey, I'm not
grumpy with you.
I'm not grumpy with you. I'm grumpy around you.
Yeah.
Or I'm not irritated
Sally taught us that.
with you. Yeah. Around you. And that has been so helpful it's helpful just in the sense of if you are overstimulated and it's not the other person's fault or it's not because of something that's going on there, I think that reassurance is always very helpful. And like, okay, we're okay. They're just having a moment. They need some space. Yeah. And I think that just clarifies for the other person, like, hey, this isn't necessarily personal. It doesn't solve all the problems, but I'm just saying that is one tool that has been very helpful for me, for us.
Yeah. I mean, this is not answering, this is, I
We're
guess,
just
answering the
responding.
question in a roundabout way. But I would wonder, at least I know this is common in our case, that often that can become a pattern, or during different seasons that can happen a lot, where there's just constant overstimulation, and maybe one spouse, their nervous system is just more reactive, or maybe it's both of you. And I think there has to be time carved out for you to be able to talk about what is happening on a regular basis, and to be able to put some sort of plan together that you both agree to. You're not going to follow it perfectly 100% of the time. But if we're going to be able to be one and parent together in oneness, we have to have a plan for when either one of us or both of us is overstimulated, is over-responding, is not handling stuff well, where we can either like tap each other out, like, okay, you clearly need a break. I'm doing okay. You're out. I'm in. Like, not in a shameful way, but like, hey, we're going to partner together, or some sort of plan for when that happens. That is helpful in the reoccurring hurt that can happen when you don't have a plan in place, or you don't have a language around what's happening. And you're just like, man, every time they're mad at me, every time they're overstimulated, they're freaking out at me. Like, we immediately take it as personal if we haven't had space to be able to communicate about it.
Yeah, but it makes it super, because the question or the thought is forgive. How do you forgive?
Yeah.
I think you have to make the choice, but I also think one of the things that's super helpful is learn when you're overstimulated, learn what that feels like, learn what you're acting like.
What are the signs?
What are
leading
those
up to
signs?
it?
Yeah, like learn that is a thing. There's a lot of people that move through the world and they're not even aware that that's what's actually going on. Is there's been a series of events or maybe different things that have happened that have elevated your nervous system to a point to where you're like overwhelmed, and then you start responding and reacting in different ways. And so I think part of our journey is like learning when that is, knowing what it is, knowing maybe how to stay away from it, even like what are those things that do trigger those parts of me, and just being aware of that. I think that's really helpful.
So are you talking about self-awareness, aware of your own mounting
Yeah, I'm saying
tension?
Yeah, just like
Yes.
learning first.
Okay.
But like
that's
we'll
good.
talk about forgiving, right? But I think one of the ways you start forgiveness is huge. You need to apologize for those moments when you're overstimulated, when you react. I think you need to, just like we've talked about many times, you need to apologize, you need to ask forgiveness. At the same time, as a way to not continue unintentionally that hurt, you need to learn, how do you actually move through the world? Are you connected with these parts of you when you're completely overwhelmed and shut down? And that's been really helpful as well. And we don't have this dialed by any means. I think we go in and out of like crazy moments. We've had a couple weeks where it's just like everyone seems to be just dysregulated and off. And like, that's what it feels like. It's what it's been like. And so I had a trip in the middle of all this, and that gave me enough time to step away, to calm down in like a nervous system sense, to come back and to be like, okay, I can see a little more clearly. I can be a little bit more present. I feel like I'm learning more each day about how I'm impacted by it. So anyway, lots of details on that.
I would also add, if you're the one who's becoming dysregulated, I think that earlier when I had 4 kids at home vying for attention, at one point, 2 horses, 2 dogs, 2 cats,
2
and 4 kids.
Well, we got the second dog
We
and the
just
cats
needed
for
an arc.
Elizabeth,
That's
who then
right.
got bored with the dog and then got bored with the cats, and we ended
Yes,
up with all of
okay.
them
Side
because she was
story.
into her horse. But anyway,
Side story. Okay,
Oh
but
my
there were
gosh.
times when I would
Very nice
just
parents.
feel like I was losing it. But
Yes.
I wanted Phil to notice, without me saying anything, I wanted him to see the signals that I was
That's fun.
doing too much.
Oh, I
and
love
then,
that.
and, obviously that is
keep
you know,
talking. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
So honest moment here. And I just remember feeling indignant that he wasn't rescuing me from basically too much going on.
Yeah.
In fact, more than that, he was generally rather oblivious and throwing a few of his own demands in there at the same time. Requests in there at the same time.
I love how that moved from demands to request.
But if I
Good
would
catch.
have one thing I could go back and do is exactly what you were saying, Brooke.
Yeah.
I would begin to recognize the signs in myself and then be clearly communicating before I was ratcheted up too far, clearly communicating to me, honey, I'm real close to the edge. Just warning here. You could even do it with humor. Warning here, blink, blink, blink. I'm about ready to implode. In which case, I think
he says this to me all the time.
okay. I wish that I had done that instead of making. So I would then, on top of everything else, be furious at Phil for saying something like, "What's the matter with you?" Which is an unwise thing to say.
Oh, I'm just laughing at how much.
I think to which I would reply, "Are you seriously asking me that?"
Yeah, we've never had this dynamic. So interesting that it's
think
interesting how
that-
generational patterns follow
Yes.
so quickly.
Here we go.
It's so interesting. I'm learning a lot right now.
Wow.
So I think, maybe if you've seen your spouse begin to, get to the close to the edge, maybe our stance ought to be, how can I actually help that person right now?
Yeah.
Instead of blame, instead of being annoyed that they're bothering you with their emotionalism, just, we are one. We love each other. We actually really do, even when we don't act like it sometimes. And just, there is a point, like, it was wrong of me to expect Phil to rescue me. On the other hand, we can watch it in each other and see signs and just be that loving person. So for me, one of my love languages is, affection, just in that moment, a little bit of, affection to just calm me down, or I'm over responsible. And I think you're that way too, Elizabeth. So we bring it on ourselves. And where it's responsible sounds like such a good word, but where it's no longer a good thing, where it's now these self-imposed rules and standards that you're actually not capable of in that moment.
I'm not touching this with a 10
So
foot pole.
having Phil give me, as he's often done, remind me that I don't have to do everything,
No.
and even step in and help, is like a cure. Is an easy way to, I don't know what is, kind of deflate some of that
Yeah.
angst that's building up. I'm sure there are much better words, but it does make it feel like it deflates a little
Yeah.
bit. Oh, I'm not by myself.
Yeah.
Phil's coming alongside me. He's helping me. And in our case, I would say it was generally me who got overwhelmed. And when Phil is overwhelmed, he gets a little bit more
Snippy. He gets snippy. He gets like
a little
curt,
bit, yeah,
like
a
curt.
little bit like. I like the
Direct?
word directive. He
Yeah.
gets very directive, which might be
That's
also
nicer than
bossy.
aggressive.
Yes, yes. And so for me to be
too,
able to
Phil.
say, okay, this is Phil because he has not had a break.
Sure.
He really hasn't had a break. It's
But
too
it's
much.
pretty, but you have a lot of capacity. It's hard to get you to that spot.
That's
If
right.
you're there, there's problems. Like
Yeah.
you're
Well,
barely
he's there.
Did
It's
you notice how she
legitimate.
said, or even help? She's told me before that you help a lot more than I ever helped.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, okay. So which
but-
speaks to the other part of the question, roles, spousal roles. I
Yeah.
think that I had rigidly locked us into roles when we were raising our kids. In my mind, I said to myself, Phil's working full time, plus. And I get to, for most of the years of kids at home, I didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, outside the home.
Yeah, you worked
so
harder than
I
the inside the home.
took
Yeah.
on not only the traditional wife roles, but a whole bunch of Phil's more
Mhm.
traditional roles
Mhm.
because he was working legitimately and providing for our family. But I think that was a great ideal, but it didn't work out well in real life. In real
Yeah.
life, I got resentful quite often
Yeah.
that I was overdoing.
And you didn't talk about it. 'Cause
I
you
didn't
never
talk about it
complained.
because I thought I was supposed to do it that way.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I was working 50, 60 hours a week. I
Yeah.
was loving every second of it, which made it probably even harder for you.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you were by my side as a pastor. But
Yeah. So,
Um,
I mean, I think the roles thing is the biggest caution I would have is don't make it too rigid. That it has to be fluid. Like
Well,
if
even
roles is who does what.
it's interesting because I'm looking here, and another question is like addressing household chores. I work
Yeah.
part-time, but am still expected to do primary print. Did you just submit another question? Oh my gosh, Elizabeth.
before you go to that one, can I say something about this
No,
one?
I'm saying these are all kind of tied together. So I was going to ask, what's your wisdom on this? I'd love to
Well,
hear
I mean,
where you're coming from.
we've been on this one for a long time. I just had a scripture I wanted to share. So
Yes.
I think the original question sounded to me like, what do
Forgiving.
I do when my
Mhm.
spouse is
Stimulated,
overstimulated?
Yeah.
How do I respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I think every marriage deals with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on your personalities, like Diane holds it all inside and then it will come out, and I'm more verbal. We like to say most of our arguments are started by me and perpetuated by her.
Yes.
But one of the things we teach on marriage is to not is if you're able to,
Yes.
in the moment, if you're actually walking with the Lord and suddenly your spouse attacks you or says something because of whatever, is to, and I'm just going to read this from 1 Peter 3. I don't know, maybe we'll teach on this
I
at
love
the
this.
marriage
Yes.
conference, but
This is
we call this giving a blessing instead.
Mhm.
So, and it's actually a quote of Psalm 34, which is a psalm of David, which is beautiful. So it's to sum up, let all be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit. Okay, that's really important. I think we should do a podcast on humility, what it is and what it isn't. If the spouse is actually walking in humility in that moment and kind-hearted, and this kind of came out of the blue, it says not returning evil for evil. That's what really is the worst thing.
Yeah.
Where you feel suddenly attacked, and so you're going to attack back, and then you're going to attack back, and you're going to attack. Pretty soon, this thing like, now we're really fighting, and all it started off with, I told you, why come you didn't get her at 5:15 when you said you would, or whatever. And now we're talking about something bigger, or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. For you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. And then this is what I love. For let him who means, this is a quote of Psalm 34, him who means to love life, who doesn't want to love life and see good days? I want to have good days. Refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking guile. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayer. So I think that if you're able to, in that moment, resist returning evil for evil, and with the power of the Holy Spirit,
That's good.
say something kind like,
Give a
wow,
blessing.
I see you're really, I don't know, upset right now.
Choose your words carefully.
You know, be careful.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to help or something like that. You know, something that can diffuse it and say, and what I love about you is whenever you get like this, you're not going to stay this way. You know, I used to watch Luis Palau, whom I loved. You know, he's fiery Latin. I mean, he's preaching all over the world. He was a, Latin macho man. He was a strong man.
Yeah.
And, he would tell you he struggled with a temper.
Yeah.
And I would see him in situations where you'd see that come out of him. But then every time I'd be with him the next day and he would say, this morning as I was with the Lord, he convicted me, and I saw this guy is walking with the Lord. And I think that if you've got a godly spouse and they have that moment of, flesh or, something that came out that shouldn't have been there because they're becoming more and more like Jesus. We're being saved from the power of our flesh on a daily basis. I just think if one of the spouses can give a blessing instead, it can diffuse the situation more quickly. And if you're not able to do that, our good friend Jim Lendy, which we all love to pieces, gave us a tool, was more for Diane than me because I'm the one that I want to resolve it. Okay, well, let's solve it right now. And she's not ready to solve it because she's still figuring out what it is.
Feeling the big emotions.
She's feeling big emotions. She's not even sure why she's feeling the big emotions. Yeah. So we came up with a word where she would say, Selah, which means, that's a Bible word in the Psalms. It means pause and consider. And they would be like a musical interval. So pause and consider. So God asks us all through the Psalms, pause and consider what you just read.
Yes.
Or heard. And I think that helped.
But that word Selah was supposed to be the key to stop everything.
We agreed together that meant stop the emotion, stop the argument. I need time to consider. Yeah. And then was Bill and Lori Kais that taught us, if the one who says I need time to before I can talk about this, they need to be the one to come back and say, now I'm ready to talk about this. Because otherwise the other one is saying.
So we're not talking days later.
Yeah, we're not talking days later. Like maybe it's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And by then you've been able to de-escalate a bit. But they're ready to talk about it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, I just think that's a what the Bible would say.
That's a very helpful, practical.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, I can't do that. I mean, no, I think you have the Holy Spirit. So you have the power available to do that. And that's where humility has to come in. Like, wow, I really wasn't walking with the Lord in that moment. I was thinking all about myself or whatever it might be. Well,
even maybe to one of the questions, kind of like the spousal roles stuff. Yeah. I think it's interesting because times have changed and the pendulum the pendulum always swings generation to generation. And even in the last probably 10 years or so, I think stuff has changed even more, right? And so it's really interesting to think through all the ways that that's changed. I would just say something that is interesting is I still see the pendulum swinging too far the other way. So, you're being gracious and saying I'm helping. Well, my family needs my help in a very practical way. The needs of my kids, my family, my setup, it needs my attention in ways that maybe yours didn't at the time. Now, that doesn't mean could you have been more present? Could you guys have talked about that more in the sense of presence of stepping in more in certain ways? Sure. I think there's always room to come towards your spouse. But I also see guys that are guys and gals both that are still overdoing it either direction. So now you have dads that are just like, they have the full-time job. Maybe the spouse, the wife doesn't, but there's like hey, we share everything 50-50. But the load's not like fully split that way. Like there's still a lot going on. So I don't think it's a do everything the way that this other person does it or the way I do it or the way other people do it. I think it's looking at your spouse, your role and saying, how do we divide this up in a way that feels like we're sharing this load, but with understanding? Because if you came to me all the time and didn't understand all the things I have going on with running an organization as an example, and you're like, no, I'm expecting you to do the same stuff I'm doing, like all the same amount. That would be really overwhelming. And I don't want to even say unfair, but almost like, well, it doesn't always work 50-50. That doesn't always play out that way. It's not like I can always do the stuff she can do and vice versa. We don't have those, we have different gifts. So it's interesting. I know that people have a lot to say, but I just wanted to set that up. I think spousal roles have changed and that's okay. But I don't think the goal is trying to figure out or trying to just get down in the middle, like make sure you do your part. I woke up 3 nights with the baby. You wake up 3 nights with the baby.
That's so
the last one,
like it's a 50-50 deal when it should be a serving each other deal.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I think I like the word partnership than roles, because roles seems like this clearly defined, this is what I do, this is what you do, and we stay in our lane. But really, raising a family, being married while raising a family requires so much partnership. Yeah. And when you think about like division of labor, really is what you're talking about, the labor that it takes to run a life, a home, to work, to run a house. You think back to pre the Industrial Revolution. Everybody worked side by side all day long, doing all the things, and had their clear, these are the tasks you do, these are the tasks I do. But both mother and father worked together to take care of the home and the family. It was
business,
yes,
which was usually agriculture.
It was combined side by side labor. We're all doing all the roles. And it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution, when men went to work and women stayed home, that those roles got split. And I think what we're seeing is that worked for a while. That was necessary for a good long while. As things have changed, and now more often than not, both spouses are working.
Right.
That doesn't work anymore the way that it used to work.
Nope.
And so it makes me think of, I think it's Pete Scazzaro who talks about expectations are the huge things. I don't even think he talks about just in marriage, but just in relationships in general. And that expectations need to have three things. They need to be clear, they need to be spoken, and they need to be agreed upon. And I think the same thing comes down to our families and roles or partnership or who does what. Those expectations or those roles need to be clear, they need to be spoken, and they need to be agreed upon. And then I would add to that, in a family, they need to be reevaluated all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because what worked for us when our kids were little or when we had 2 or 3 little kids versus what the needs of our family and our home life are now are very different. Yeah. And I think it took me longer to catch up to the reality of the help that I needed. Took me longer than it did even him. And now we're in a new stage where I'm having to speak up more and say, wow, I can't do all of this. We got it, but I don't know the solution. We got to figure it out together.
Yeah.
And then life's moving so fast. We've not yet been able to get to the like agreed upon plan of, okay, here's what we should do. It's like the overwhelm just keeps coming. So I'm the one who has to keep bringing it up to say, we still need to figure this out. And so I think there are seasons where it takes a while to figure out what all of that should look like. But if it's not clear, spoken, agreed upon, and reevaluated all the time, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of tension and resentment, wishing your spouse was doing more of this or that. I also think, like on a very practical level, a weekly meeting where you just talk about all the things that need to happen so that you're on the same page, so you know what needs to happen, where you agree upon and divide up, okay, can you do this? Can you do that? Is very helpful on just a practical level. Yeah. It's not fun. Those are not like
what you just
fun
said
conversations.
Is brilliant. And it never ends. Like, we don't have the complex life that you do now. We just have Trooper. And
our individual.
We did also talk a lot about your death over lunch.
And
that was also.
But I mean, we had to have this meeting. We're getting ready to have the entire Comer clan at our house, 19 people.
Yeah,
and we don't have enough bedrooms for everybody, so there's an Airbnb. All the complexity of it. And Diane's later than ever in getting to presents because we're all busy. So even at our stage and age, we had to have this meeting yesterday. We had what were the 3? Clear. We were trying to be clear,
spoken and agreed upon.
Clear. We had to speak and we had to agree.
I might be butchering his 3. I'm pretty sure I've got those right.
And
I know it's spoken and agreed upon.
And we had to work through, since I can be like, just grab it, let's go.
Yeah.
That she's going to be the primary, I said leader. She goes, well, you don't like that word. How about I'll be primarily responsible? Yes. So in a sense, I'm going to assist her more than she's going to assist. So we had to have this meeting just over Comer Christmas. Yeah. Because it's a lot of moving parts for 19 people. So I think this is a skill you can develop now.
Yes.
And it's going to carry it through your whole life. It's never going to go away, as long as you have children and eventually grandchildren. Mm-hmm. You're going to be having these meetings, which is, I think, really important.
And honestly, this is good leadership. This is good leadership training for both of you.
The weekly meeting is really important. So remember, we learned this from our mentors, Bill and Lori Kais. Bill was a missionary, then he was training hundreds of missionaries all over the world. But she said, I knew that every Saturday morning he's going to take me to breakfast. and I would keep my list of what I wanted to talk about, So I'm not saying that was good that she had to, but they had 4 kids, and they raised 4
Close.
godly
And
kids.
4 kids in 5
the
years.
whole church knew about the Kai's family. Like, I hope our kids are kind of like that family,
Yeah.
But they had that weekly time where the 2 of them could sit down and talk about stuff. So I think finding that's
Yeah.
I think that's
I do too, but I also think that you just have to be aware that I think one of you mentioned it changes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now in a completely different paradigm. And just the other day, like Phil mentioned, I'm later than I've ever been in Christmas. I'm always an advocate of getting as much done as early as possible because I
Is this where
love
you get
Christmas.
it all from? This is where it's all.
Because but there's a reason.
November.
It's because I love
sorry.
Christmas so much.
No, in November, she's like,
Yes.
we're late. And I'm like, sweetheart.
No,
It's
not in November. Not in November.
That is so true. That happened. You were like, oh my gosh, I need a list. I was like, it's not even December 1st. I don't have any idea what I'm asking for Christmas. And she was like, we have to get
Which
on it. And I'm
is,
like,
Brooke, by the way, which is one of the reasons I'm so far behind is I couldn't get anybody's list this year.
Yeah,
but
that's my
honestly,
fault.
I realized that I was looking at Christmas now the same way I did when I was a full-time at-home mom, where I basically did it all pretty much, and we early would come up with a budget, but I did all the shopping, I did all the wrapping, I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the everything. But that's not our life anymore. I now spend many hours a week work that I love. But so that Phil was just so easy to talk to about, okay, so what do we need to delegate? What can I not do this year? What can you take over instead? And we've done it in other things too. Like I've always been the cook. Phil loves to eat. I'm a little bit less enthusiastic about a
I love
big
how you
meal.
said that.
I don't mean that in a bad way. It's but I mean, honestly, oftentimes
That's why
by
you're-
mid-morning, he's asking, what's for dinner?
Well,
that's the
that's why
most
you're
important
asking me to
question of the
smuggle
day.
snacks from my mom's house.
Yeah, exactly. Because she doesn't have time to
planning
make
ahead.
8 different cookies like
No,
you're going
I
to have.
used to make like 8 different
You're right. You're right.
I'm fine with one kind of cookie. But honestly, just being able to flex over time and to be able to say, okay, we now need a little bit of a different division of labor. So for cooking, Phil was kind of having a moment of wishing that he could have some of my spaghetti and my chili. Those
Every
weeks.
winter, of course.
Yeah. But I usually make him in
Naturally.
really
I wanted to be invited to your house for Sabbath dinner because I was
Oh, yeah.
driving
Heard it
Duke
was
home from
spaghetti.
school. I go, so what's happening? Oh, it's Sabbath dinner tonight. We're having Dad's favorite spaghetti and garlic bread or something.
It was his birthday dinner.
Or his birthday dinner. I said,
And
that's
it was
probably his
made
birthday dinner on Sabbath night,
Yeah.
right?
Well, but it's made with spicy Italian sausage.
Yes.
In the sauce.
And I
Oh, yeah.
wanted
Sorry,
to be
you
invited,
should've-
but because she was gone. But I didn't want to be invited.
Oh,
No,
you
no,
should've-
I'm jokingly honest.
You
I
should
wouldn't
have
have.
texted me.
I wouldn't have
to
come.
give you a
God,
plate.
You were by yourself.
No,
Oh.
Matthew was there. I wouldn't
Oh,
have.
Matthew
I
was
would. Well, actually, anyway, I wouldn't have come anyway because
So back to the spaghetti.
But I'm just saying,
Back
We have to solve this family
with
problem right
spicy
now.
Italian. Yes.
Yes, keep
We
going.
must be tired or something because we are really talking a lot.
I like
But
it. I like it.
so I said, okay, I'll make spaghetti, but I usually make a huge big batch at a time and freeze it in ball jars so that he can pull it out whenever he wants. But will you be my sous chef? So I'll make spaghetti anytime if I don't have to clean it up, if I don't have to cook, if I don't have to dice all of the onions.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
he's
fair.
great with that. He's great with
that's
that.
a great-
So it's like,
Tomorrow or Saturday. I'm all in.
yes,
It's a
we're
great
on it.
division
I
of
like
labor.
this.
I said I'll be
feel
your
like-
sous chef anytime.
Can this be one of our clear spoken, agreed upon
I
expectations?
do not like when you try to commit me to stuff while on air on a podcast. I am saying we will talk about this later.
Is that a little passive aggressive?
Yeah, I know exactly what she's doing. Trying to get me to commit. No, I actually do. No, I help with lots of stuff. Are you kidding? I do so many things. I'm not as much
You
of a
do
cook
do a lot.
as you are.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids, I did teach Birdie the other night how to make quesadillas. And I have to tell you something. There's nothing more rewarding than teaching someone who really does want to learn anything, but especially quesadillas. And I'm teaching her. I was like, "This is how much. This
She
is
was
what you
so
do."
proud of
We're
herself.
salting the. One of the little tricks our friends showed us was you put a little salt on the pan before you put the tortilla down. So you
Ooh,
butter
I
some
haven't
corn
done that.
tortillas.
Game changer.
You put a little salt down, Then you put the tortilla, then the cheese, then the other tortilla. Obviously, anyone listening that's an adult understands this. But to an 8-year-old with special needs, this is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
And she was like making them, and then everyone was full. And she's like, Dad, I just love making that so much. Are you so hungry? And I was like, and I wasn't. And I was like, absolutely, I am. Of course. And she's like, do you want like 2 more? I was like, sure. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to eat them. But I was like, we're wasting this food. I didn't care. Like, she was just so happy making these quesadillas. Even the next morning, she's like, can I make quesadillas? I was like, not for breakfast.
But that next day, she came over and I was making cookies with her.
Yeah.
And she gave me a step-by-step rundown to tell me how her dad told her to make quesadillas.
There you go.
So
it was really
really
one of those
worth
cool
it.
moments that, happened all of a sudden. You didn't plan it, but it was awesome. And then last night I was talking to both the girls, and Duke and Scarlett are a little bit older now, and they had some of their friends over before youth group. So there's a bunch of high school and middle school age kids that are not just our kids in the house. And you had them over and you said, we'll do quesadillas. And so she told Birdie and Sloan, she's like, girls, you're on making quesadillas. And then Birdie was so elated. And then during that taught Sloan how to make quesadillas. We were in the car for a minute, Birdie and Sloan and I last night. And Birdie's trying to tell me, like, so I made all the quesadillas. I really like when I put them down and they crackle. And I was like, she's like, no, that's not the word. I was like, you mean sizzle? And she goes, yes, I love when it sizzles. And then then Sloan was like, yeah, I did it. I learned how to do it. And Sloan goes, but I still got to work on my flip. I'm not doing good on my flip yet. It's hard to get it all the way over. And Birdie's like, yeah, she's got to work on her flip. But she's doing it. Like they were just dead serious. Anyway, I don't know how we got on that.
I have a one-up one for everybody. I was talking to a young woman who has her own small business, very small business. She's trying to get off the ground. She has 2 young children, and she has a side business to add to the income. Her husband works full-time, and her kids are pretty little, so they go to bed early. They, together every night, put the kids to bed after dinner, and then every night they go through and clean the house together. Just, I'm sure they're not scrubbing in the corners, but every night
I can't believe
together,
you said this, Diane. I can't believe you said
they
this.
go through the house like that.
Edit this out.
Edit this out, please.
I just thought that would have saved my
That's just
life.
what I'm longing to do every night.
Let me just say something, though. Let me say something. We don't do
If
that.
you really love your wife.
No, we don't do that. But acts of service is a huge way Elizabeth is loved. So whether it's enough for you're just sitting there calling it.
I'm really liking this idea. She just threw out.
You are never expected to do everything. That said, it needs to be identified that in marital situations, maybe one spouse has a higher need than the other for a certain level of cleanliness.
Yes.
And it's sometimes unfair to put your oppressive desire on your spouse as the standard is the one who has the highest standard, and sometimes isn't open to talking about doing things a little differently. So I'm always on helping and always about cleaning or always whatever. But it's interesting though, because like that's a weird dynamic, and I don't want to talk anymore about it or we'll get in an argument. But the fact is,
I actually think we've come a long way in that in me not putting my need on other people and recognizing what I need to ask help for, what I need to just do myself because it's only important to me and it's unfair to put on other people. But then I think you've really grown over the years. I mean, this is just the beauty of marriage year after year after year and talking about stuff of you've really learned part of it is a way to love me, and certain things you've just taken on. I don't even remember when, somewhere in our homeschooling journey, this was probably like a year or 2 ago, somehow we stumbled upon, he was asking how, I said the mornings are just so hard to get everybody like out of bed and dressed and the normal morning like routine and chores done and to not start school at like noon. Like it's just, they're just hard. And so he started making the bed in the morning.
Which
and
I did
tidying
anyway.
up a few things. It doesn't take very long. But when I was able to, again, had to say it out loud and we had to agree upon it, to say it would be really great if I could count on 2 things every morning. If you could get the girls dressed and if you could make the bed. I said they're like not time consuming things, but something about it takes a huge like stress off of me. It's hard for Birdie to get dressed in the morning. So I would like set out all the clothes the night before so he's not having to hunt for clothes. And just like being able to communicate clearly about those things. And I had to say, but I need it to be really consistent for it to be helpful. That I just know those two things are going to happen. And you've done a wonderful job, like being as consistent as you can. It's not 100% of the time. And he lets me know if he can't get to it. Hey, I don't have time this morning.
Well, life. I mean, again, life happens. But
yeah, and that's a silly example, but I highlight that only because so often there are things that are frustrating in our marriage are the silly little things like that.
Yeah.
That if we can just have really clear conversation around and be able to then continue to have dialogue about is really helpful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Dishwasher, I heard something
She
about
whispered dishwasher to me.
They tell me, oh yeah,
Dishwasher.
You know what? My kids tell me you empty the dishwasher because you empty it in the morning when they're still sleeping,
And it's
they're like,
so loud.
"Pops
So
wakes up
noisy.
and
I know.
empties the dishwasher in the morning." And we're like, "Well, it's his house; he can do that." And they're like, "Yeah, but isn't he? Why is he doing that in the morning?" And I was like, "I don't know. Let's just ask Bob."
And he doesn't do anything quiet.
No.
No, Bob.
Well, I
well,
run
I mean,
it-
it's not really fair. You can't. You're
There's
unplugged
a
half the
reason.
time. He can do anything at any volume and not bother
That's right.
anybody.
I didn't know they could hear it, so I'll be
Oh,
quieter.
you don't know. They laugh.
It was a
because-
bigger problem in your last house because it would literally wake them all up.
Yeah, but I don't think it does
It
now.
was
Well,
very
that's the
small.
last thing I do. I run it at night too, and then while I'm making
Empty the-
coffee, I empty it because she really appreciates it, and I kind of like it. It's methodical.
Why do you what do you like about it?
Because you're done and it's done.
Yeah, it's like I
And
like that about
everything
vacuuming.
is put away. You know?
Vacuuming's very
Yeah.
therapeutic. That and
Yeah.
mowing the lawn.
But
when you
how
see
did
the
it start,
lines-
Phil?
Oh, I
How
don't
did
want to
it
say
start?
that.
Oh,
I don't
man.
want to say that. We've said that before.
Okay.
Oh, no,
Okay.
you can if
we'll
you want.
just leave it a secret.
No, you can say it if you want.
I bet you it started with a tension point. Is my guess.
No, it didn't actually.
Oh, really? Now I'm curious.
No.
Now I can't remember. So you should say it.
So-
It was just a morning I was doing it, and she was over reading. You must be reading your Bible or
I was in the
something.
family room.
Oh, I
reading my
remember
in the
Bible.
this.
family room.
I don't want to hear
Yeah.
this.
And she,
Yeah, I'm plug
And
my
I
ears.
said,
Plug your ears.
Phil, that is so sexy.
Yeah, I'm
Gross.
done. I'm done. I'm out.
Okay,
I'm
we'll
out.
leave it there.
Next question.
But truth be told, that's a
Truth
great
be told,
motivator. That's a
in
huge
that
motivator
moment.
for any man. If she started telling me things like that about anything, I'd be like, "That's my job forever.
That's my job forever.
That's my job forever."
Honestly, he has emptied the dishwasher every day ever since that. It's been a long
So,
time.
ladies that are listening, take that as a challenge. I dare you. Oh, that's really funny. It feels a little manipulative, but I like it.
But honestly, when you're up early and your husband's doing something that is just a boring job that you've done 1,000 times, and he knows that you kind of just don't like that job, and he just does it without being told, without being hinted at, without being asked, there is something so appealing about that just draws out the love and value.
Yeah. Well, I know we're kind of all over the place with that /question conversation, but two quick things and then we'll close today. But one that I just think is very practical. Let's just get it very practical. How to prioritize each other when you're both really tired. I'm laughing because I was like, oh, that's, I know we're in different stages of life. I would just say for Elizabeth and I think that's probably that is a very real-time question. How to prioritize each other when you're both exhausted. I think right now it's mostly in little ways. You know what I mean? Obviously there's the big ways that we all talk about. I think it's in the little things right now is what I'm experiencing. But how about for you guys? How do you prioritize each other? Because like in our stage of life with kids, with the nuances of everything, it's just a season where I think you first have to just say, we want to prioritize each other. And then I think it's finding time within your life and schedule. I think just don't underestimate the power of the little things.
Yeah.
I know that this is really stupid and it is actually really, really silly, but I also think it's been helpful. I think you fall asleep really fast at night if I cuddle her. Like if I'm like close to her and cuddling her, she'll fall asleep like in a second. And it's just been little, but we've just been like more purposefully like, okay, let's like fall asleep. Let's just like have just a moment to cuddle, like just fall asleep. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's been a huge, like, it's weirdly simple and super connecting. It's like, we don't have to, we're not talking because we don't have any energy to talk. I don't want to say anything else. We've talked all day to each other, to kids, to having to deal with situations. So that's been actually something that's so little, but I think that's just one of the ways that we've found, that's our thing, to prioritize each other. It's the little stuff.
Yeah, and finding moments to connect. Find the times in your day where you're not as tired. Like what he's highlighting is nighttime is just not a good time for us right now. And so we have to find other times where we do have energy, where we do have clarity of mind to be able to have not just a like to-do list conversation, you know? And so again, to the seasonality of parenting, I remember when our kids were younger, all of our time to connect was at like 7:00 when they went to bed. Those were glorious years when we could have a conversation, spend time together, and we could watch a show all before 9:00. It was wonderful. Those days are long gone. Nobody is asleep by 9:00. I want to be asleep by 9:00. So we don't have like this, the kids are in bed and we have several hours before it's time to go. We don't have that anymore. And so it has to look different now. And so I think it's just finding what season am I in, what times during the day do I have energy, and is there a way to link our schedules to make that more possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Last one really quick. How do you receive feedback from your spouse in a healthy way? How do you receive feedback from your spouse in a healthy way? So constructive criticism maybe might be, how do you receive that in a healthy way? I think there's two things. You have to also give it in a healthy way.
That's what I was going to say. Is it being given
Well, we
in
did
a
a whole
healthy
episode
way?
on that. We can link that in the show notes.
Which one? I can't remember.
Care
all the
before
stuff.
criticism.
Oh yeah, we did recently. Yeah, we did do something on that. Actually, I think that's a great way to respond to that. Is we will put the link in the show notes for that episode, because that was a marriage episode and we went at length about that very topic. But I do think a lot of care is very helpful. Doing things with care, which that whole episode's about. So we won't go into it here, but link is in the show notes for that episode. Make sure to check that out. And thank you for all your questions. Everybody asking questions. So many good questions. We have many more that we'll put into our long list of questions. But thank you, everybody, for asking those questions. Phil and Diane, Elizabeth, thank you all for responding and just being honest and vulnerable. Obviously, this is both fun and hard and challenging. It's our life, and a little bit of it is on display, but we're also happy to share our blunders with you all. And we're learning too still. And I love, Phil and Diane, one of the things I think you do great is being honest about the fact that even though you've been married 47 years?
46.
46 years. I always had a year.
46 and a half.
46 and a half. You're still learning and you're still figuring it out. And you're still being open and honest about that. And that's just encouraging, because it makes all of us that are not there yet know that it's still.
And one of the things is about getting older is you can look back and start to say, oh, I missed it there. And maybe if I can be honest about how I missed it, I might be able to alert somebody else to a common pitfall.
Yeah.
And that's really satisfying. That's really satisfying.
Well, it's very helpful. So thank you everyone for listening today.